Parents are supposed to protect their children and give them the love and care they need to thrive. Unfortunately, not all parents take this responsibility seriously. In extreme cases, this lack of care can have a catastrophic consequence and even lead to the unimaginable tragedy of a child dying. Today, we are discussing the case of Joseph Dominic Dill.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for jumping back into the abyss with us today. I'm Hallie.
And I'm Brittany.
And we are super excited to talk to you today about this case, about Joseph Dominic Dill. It's a crazy one. We are both heated when we talk about it, so it's going to be really good. We even have an interview in our episode today that we did with a nurse who's been working in the medical field for a bit with different positions. So it's going to be really cool to find her perspective and to let you guys tune in a little bit about this case. We actually found out about this case through Dr. Phil, but we just thought it was so absolutely insane that we had to share it with you guys, our beloved followers, our friends. We had to let you know about the insanity of this case. So we're really excited to jump into it with you. Make sure to go ahead and like our Facebook and our Instagram, subscribe, follow, do all of that fun stuff that we tell you about every single week because we just want you guys to enjoy it and to be a part of our community. So please go and do that. Make sure to give us that 5-star rating. And if you're feeling generous, we have a Patreon. You know what they're for. So if you're feeling like you want to give a little bit, we would love to have you do it. And we would love to hear from you in our community. Please be a part of things. Please talk to us, reach out to us. We love to hear from you guys. Also, we have a great community on YouTube, a lot of discussions that happen on our comment section, and we would love to have you go and join in there. A lot of people have things to say and good input on the cases, so if you want to hear some stuff about that, always go on there and check it out.
So let's jump into the abyss. Joseph Dominic Dill was 10 years old in 2015. He went by Dom, so that's what we're going to be referring to him as during this episode. Dom lived in Barksville, Kentucky with his parents Pete, Joseph, and Jennifer, and 4 siblings. He had 3 sisters, Emily Rose, Rebecca Hope, and Aseneth Diane, and he had a brother, Charles Eugene. He also had another brother named Ezekiel who had passed away years prior. Dom wanted to be a doctor. He had big dreams for his life, but his family life wasn't easy. According to statements made by the Dill children, Joseph was aggressive and was emotionally and physically abusive. This was said to be almost a daily occurrence. Jennifer witnessed this abuse that included screaming and beatings. In the interview with Dr. Phil, Jennifer said that Joseph was arrested at least 4 times for domestic violence and that he was consistently abusive and controlling. The Dill children and Jennifer all recall incidents of this abuse. Joseph had chased the children around the home with a belt and a paddle, beating them. He would hit, slap, punch, and choke the children, often without any inciting incident, as if anything could justify that treatment. The children constantly had bruises and marks from this abuse. Emily even had an incident where Joseph just barreled into her room and started punching her in the head for no reason. Joseph would allegedly hit the children with vacuum parts and beer bottles. In addition to this physical abuse, Joseph would also deny proper medical care to his children. He would not let them go to the doctor, even when it was clearly needed. His daughter recalled a time when she had a staph infection under her arm and Joseph wouldn't let her go to the hospital until it became so severe that she needed emergency surgery. She was told that waiting much longer could have killed her. Emily said that her father had beaten her and even kicked her out of the house, but she continued to stand by him and defend him. Joseph sidestepped these accusations a lot of the time, but he did admit that he had been drinking too much and that he was extremely depressed over the death of his young son, Ezekiel. He also admitted that he was taking psychological medications.
Jumping over to the death of his young son, it happened in 2007 when Jennifer and Joseph lost their nearly 2-month-old baby, Ezekiel. While Jennifer was at work, Ezekiel was co-sleeping with his father. Joseph swears that he had not been drinking or intoxicated in any sort of way when it happened, but he said that Ezekiel just stopped breathing. It's pretty much all we could get about that. Ezekiel just wasn't breathing. And so when Jennifer came home, she started compressions, but their son was gone. The coroner was unable to explain the cause of death, so automatically he got put under the default of SIDS. which if you don't know what SIDS is, it's sudden infant death syndrome. He was specifically put under the sudden unexpected infant death syndrome, but it was really just considered a default for an unknown cause of death. About 8 years later, either on July 19th or July 20th in 2015, Dom started to complain about interior neck pain, fatigue, and sudden pain on his left hip. On Dr. Phil, there was a slight comment made that we really couldn't find anywhere else, but that Tom had a bruise on his hip at the time as well. Due to the extreme pain that Dom was in, the parents decided to illegally give him some of their hydrocodone without a prescription. Joseph, Dom's father, said that he didn't know this was happening, while Jennifer said that she was giving him only 5 milligrams of her hydrocodone once because he was wailing in his sleep from pain. However, their daughter says that both her mother and father were giving Dom prescription pain pills. On July 22nd or 23rd, these dates are kind of ambiguous, so we kind of have to guess around the date that it was happening, but it for sure was either the 22nd or the 23rd. This is about 2 to 4 days after Dom started complaining about the pain he had been experiencing. He was finally taken to the doctor. He had to undergo multiple hip radiographs to search for fractures. The test came back negative, but there was a questionable growth plate fracture noted on the CT scan. It wasn't really stated where this could have come from or what may have happened. Brittany and I kind of speculate that this could be from an instance of abuse that maybe he endured, and that's maybe why they didn't want to take him when he was complaining about the pain, but we can't be 100% on that. That's just pure speculation. Dr. Kevin Flowers concluded the visit by diagnosing Dom with a closed, non-displaced fracture of the head and of his left femur, so like kind of different than just his hip. Flowers prescribed Dom hydrocodone and told the family that they needed to follow up with an orthopedic physician. On July 24th, just a day or so after he visited the doctor, Dom started to spike a fever. It was made even worse when they noticed he had no appetite for food. He started complaining about the pain that he was experiencing and how it had spread throughout his torso region from his chest to his lower abdomen. Anyone who knows anything about anatomy of the body, you obviously know that your chest and abdomen is where all of your vital organs are, so having pain in that area is pretty intense and severe. The following day, July 25th, it was mentioned that Dom had a diffuse rash and myalgia. This diffuse rash that they refer to is basically just like bluish, purplish spots on his body. That night, Jennifer had to work a 12-hour nursing shift. In case we didn't mention it, she is a nurse, and as we know, nurses work crazy hours, and so she had to work overnight for 12 hours, so she wasn't home when this rash started to form and the myalgia was noticeable. Joseph, on the other hand, was home. He saw this dark coloration, and he also noticed that his right heel had a dark discoloration, but instead of doing anything, he just put Dom in bed for the night and assumed everything would be fine in the morning.
In talking to Dr. Phil, Jennifer recalled July 26, 2015. She said when she returned home from her night shift at about 8:30 a.m., that's when she noticed that Dom was very pale and covered in the blue spots. She said she realized at that point Dom needed medical attention, but instead of immediately taking him to the car and rushing him to the emergency room, she decided to take a shower. She said she wanted to wash off anything she might have picked up at work as she was tending to patients in isolation, but this is kind of another show of questionable priorities.
And she's a nurse. Like, you know what to look out for and what's a severe thing and what's not. And I mean, it's pretty severe, his physical symptoms right now, not including the symptoms that aren't physical, you know?
Yeah, so if she had seen that he was in such a bad state that she thought, okay, it's time to go get medical attention, why was there no urgency to it? She was like, oh, I'll take a shower, I'll wind down from work and all that stuff, instead of just rushing him to the emergency room. When she finished her shower, she saw that Dom was very, very weak, and she raised the issue again that they should take Dom to a doctor. Joseph said Dom had a quote-unquote clear mind and was insisting on taking an Epsom salt bath. Now remember, this is a 10-year-old child in extreme pain and on a strong painkiller. Any one of those things would make someone's state of mind a little bit less than clear. Even Dr. Phil called this out, saying, quote, "So we have a 10-year-old on medication making the decisions about what the treatment course should be," end quote. Dom was so weak at this point that Joseph and Jennifer had to help him into the tub, and Joseph saw that he was slumping over in the bathtub. Jennifer then noticed that Dom's right heel was turning black, and this was the same one he had been complaining about earlier in the day. Instead of increasing the urgency of getting Dom to medical care, Jennifer decided that this was the perfect time for a nap. So she left Dom and Joseph and went to lay in bed. When Dom was done in the bath, Joseph took him out and put him on a big chair in the bedroom with a towel. He started trying to dress Dom so they could finally go to the doctor, and it was a huge struggle because Dom was so weak and out of it, he couldn't even help dress himself. Dom asked if he could rest for a minute as he was getting more and more tired. Jennifer was still sleeping, and Joseph decided to give Dom a minute to rest. He decided he would go make himself a cup of coffee instead of monitoring his son's rapidly declining health.
Not to mention, at this point, you shouldn't even just be monitoring his health. You should just take him to the doctor. Like, take him to the ER, take him to the emergency room right now. Like, right now, you know?
Yeah, the shower doesn't matter. The nap doesn't matter. You don't need coffee. You don't even need to get him dressed, honestly. Just put him in the car.
He doesn't
and
need
go.
clothes. Throw him over your shoulder and let's go. Like, if it was me, when I came home that second, I don't care if I've been in isolation. I'm throwing that kid over my shoulders and we are gone.
When Joseph got back into the room, he found that Dom was gasping for breath. Dom was in what is known as the death rattle. Dom's eyes were crossed and he was clearly in critical need at this point. Joseph screamed for Jennifer to wake up, and upon seeing Dom, she told Joseph that Dom was dying. Joseph tried to call 911 while Jennifer started CPR, but the phone wasn't working for some reason. She told Joseph that she was tired, so they switched places until she got the phone working. Then she resumed CPR while Joseph called for help. The ambulance arrived and medics started compressions, but Dom flatlined. Jennifer thought at this point that he was just gone. Unfortunately, it was too late for little Dom, and he died in the Cumberland County Hospital, and it was found that his cause of death was an overdose of hydrocodone due to sepsis.
The medical examiner report was presented on Dr. Phil. We weren't able to access it anywhere else. I mean, he was a kid. This case is still ongoing and fairly recent, so we didn't expect to be able to access the documents like that. We're going to tell you what the document said based off of what was screenshotted on the show. Dr. Phil didn't really address every single part of the document, but we made sure to add it onto here. Dom had acute hydrocodone intoxication. The post-mortem iliac blood toxicology showed that he had 101 nanograms per milliliter of hydrocodone in his body and 4.1 nanograms per milliliter of hydromorphone. Now, we are not medical professionals by any means whatsoever, but we did see that hydrocodone breaks down into hydromorphone in the body, so that explains where that hydromorphone kind of comes into play. Dom also had multi-system healing septic emboli and abscesses, which were involved with his lungs, myocardium, which is that thin membrane around your heart, and the skin. They were able to have Dom's funeral about 4 days after his death. About a year later, on July 14th, 2016, the Dill parents filed a lawsuit against Kevin Flowers, MD, his practice group called Southeastern Emergency Physicians, the T.J. Sampson Community Hospital, and other unknown defendants. The reasoning was medical malpractice in relation to Dom's death due to an incorrect diagnosis. The Dill stated that Dom had an undiagnosed infection with impaired kidney function, which prevented his body from being able to metabolize the hydrocodone appropriately. Throughout the court proceedings, the Dills just kept asking for extensions to hire a new counsel, but they could not provide proof that Dr. Flowers had not acted appropriately and failed to file the correct information. Ultimately, the motion was denied in the end. Even if they were able to prove that maybe Kevin Flowers diagnosed inappropriately, I still find that Jennifer is responsible. She should have acted. She should have done something. She was a nurse. She knew what sepsis looked like. She knew what a sick person looked like. And she knew that her son had been taking hydrocodone. That's bad enough, so she should have known these things and she should have done something about it. Dom's father, Joseph, went to jail for criminal child abuse, and Jennifer also got charged with criminal child abuse, but she was released from jail. She started working really hard to get Joseph out of jail. She still loved him and the property was in his name, so she couldn't get a criminal lawyer to avoid prison unless he was able to co-sign. So she really dedicated a lot of time to this, and CPS ended up removing the remaining 3 out of 5 children from the home and placed them in childcare. Joseph believes he and Jennifer were not responsible for Dom's death. He thinks that they were only charged and arrested because of the lawsuit that was filed against the doctor. This guy had abused his children. He let 2 of them die under his watch, specifically his watch. He was there the night that Dom initially started showing physical signs of fever and appetite, and the spotting rash on his body. He was there whenever the mother was in the shower, whenever the mother was taking a nap. She's also responsible, just equally, if not probably worse, because she knew what to look for. But the father was there when these two children died, and he let them die under his watch. I think they put him in prison because that is where he needs to be, along with Jennifer. We have an interview today with an experienced nurse who can explain a little bit more about the medical aspect of this case.
Thank you so much for talking with us today. To start off, why don't you tell us a bit about your qualifications and what specific fields within nursing you have experience in?
I am a registered nurse, and I have worked at a level 1 trauma center for over 4 years.
Awesome. It sounds like you have a lot of good, solid experience, that you're comfortable in the medical field, and we can't wait to hear what you have to say about some of these issues from the case. Do you mind explaining to us a little bit about your knowledge of sepsis and how it may impact different organs of the body, or what are the various stages of sepsis?
Sure. So sepsis is an infection that essentially spreads throughout the body, and it can cause multiple organ failure. So whenever a person begins to go into multiple organ failure, some of those symptoms, some of the early symptoms that you'll see is confusion, shortness of breath, a low blood pressure, a fever, and low urine output. And that is because one of the first organs to shut down, or the first organ to shut down during multiple organ failure, are the kidneys. So one of the early signs would be low urine output.
So in your perspective, at what time was there a clear sign that Dom, who was just 10 years old, was in extreme need of medical care?
Yeah, so the discoloration of the skin, the drowsiness, the paleness, all of that are late signs of sepsis, and it's showing hypoxia, which is low levels of oxygen in the bloodstream. And so I think that the blue discoloration of the skin is probably the main sign that I would have been like, this is something serious. This is something we need to get him to the emergency room immediately. That is a late sign, and that is obvious that something is very wrong. And especially with her being a nurse and understanding how the body works, I mean, that is a very bad sign. It sounds like showing hypoxia in the body, which is a late sign of severe sepsis.
Based on the information that we've kind of talked about in this podcast and that we've talked about with you, when do you believe that the boy was most likely past the point of help, as in there was just nothing else they probably could have done to help the boy because they had waited so long?
It's hard to say without being there, but I think if they would have gotten him to the hospital when she came home and found him confused with these blue spots, pale, lethargic, if they would have taken him to the hospital then, there are things that they could have done to stabilize him. But because he was at home when he became unresponsive, it was too late. But I think if she, when she got home, had taken him to the hospital, that they possibly could have done some interventions that would have been, they could have given him some fluids, helped get his blood pressure back up, run some tests, labs, figured out what was going on, and at least he would have been in a setting that was prepared to respond to what happened next.
Thank you so much for talking with us today and offering your perspective on this case.
Good luck, guys. Talk to you later.
ChildHelp.org defines child abuse as, quote, when a parent or caregiver, whether through action or failing to act, causes injury, death, emotional harm, or risk of serious harm to a child, end quote. They go on to say, quote, there are many forms of child maltreatment, including neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, exploitation, and emotional abuse, end quote. There's a lot more to abuse than just beating a child. Over 3 million reports of child abuse are made each year. To put this in perspective, college football stadiums can generally hold about 100,000 people. So imagine 30 stadiums full of people, and that's the number of reports made each year. There are many resources to learn more about what each type of abuse entails. So we encourage everyone to explore them and to learn more about this issue. We will have some more resources and websites to start you off on our website, theabysspod.com. We wanted to discuss this because some people might not even realize the extent of their experiences and how they've been impacted. And some people might not even realize that their actions are abuse. So I'm going to broadly go over each main type of abuse and share its definition from childhelp.org. Physical abuse is defined as, quote, when a parent or caregiver causes any non-accidental physical injury to a child, end quote. Sexual abuse is, quote, when an adult uses a child for sexual purposes or involves a child in sexual acts. It also includes when a child who is older or more powerful uses another child for sexual gratification or excitement, end quote. Emotional abuse is defined as, quote, when a parent or caregiver harms a child's mental and social development or causes severe emotional harm. While a single incident may be abuse, most often emotional abuse is a pattern of behavior that causes damage over time, end quote. Child neglect is defined as, quote, when a parent or caregiver does not give the care, supervision, affection, and support needed for a child's health, safety, and well-being, end quote. This can include not properly supervising a child or neglecting them emotionally, educationally, or medically, as in this case. To our knowledge, the Dill children were subjected to physical abuse and emotional abuse. They were also neglected medically and emotionally via supervision and not letting the children go to the doctor, even kicking the daughter out when Joseph was intoxicated and intimidating the kids and Jennifer was gone for work or sleeping. The children were not being properly cared for.
Unfortunately, Dom Dill is not the only child to suffer a fatality from child abuse. There are 3 cases we're going to talk about briefly, and they were all from the same area of California, around Los Angeles. First is a very popular case on Netflix about a boy named Gabriel Fernandez. This case is absolutely gut-wrenching, and we will only cover the surface details, but if you want to go watch the documentary, if you want to know more information or things like that, you can go do it on Netflix. I'm sure there's even clips about it and stuff on YouTube, so you can go check it out there. There's a whole lot more to it than what I'm about to say, but we just wanted to keep it very surface for right now. Gabriel suffered from abuse and neglect at the hand of his mother and her boyfriend. He suffered for years, and DCFS had even been involved already. Unfortunately, they didn't put enough effort into saving the boy, and he had to be rushed to the hospital at the age of 8 on May 22nd, 2013, where he was declared brain dead. Gabriel died 2 days later from blunt force trauma and neglect and malnutrition. There is so much more that goes into this, like so much more, but it is worse than you can possibly imagine, if that's even possible at this point. Another boy who suffered from fatal child abuse was a 10-year-old named Anthony Avalos. He was very mature for his age, but teachers noticed at school that he was tense a lot. He always carried a Bible around and held it really close to him, and one day the teachers remembered him dropping it, and he had a complete meltdown in the school. DCFS had to get involved in the little boy's life as well. There had been more than 13 reports of child abuse, but nothing had been done about it. One day, Anthony had to be taken to the hospital. He was bruised and burned all over his body, which at this point was just skin and bones, and he was bleeding really bad from a head injury. Anthony Avalos died at the hospital from his injuries at the age of 10. His mother and her boyfriend were both held responsible for his torture and his death, but they claimed that they were innocent. The remaining children were also removed from the home. And this was in the same area that Gabriel Fernandez lived. So this is the same DCFS that handled Gabriel's case. And now we're going to talk about another one where it was the same area, the same DCFS handling this case where another child died from fatal child abuse. This one is about a little boy named Noah Quattro, who was only 4 years old. The parents called and reported that their son had drowned in the pool. After examining the body, they were able to find suspicious bodily injuries that correlated with child abuse. Noah had fresh blood in his rear, which is proof of sodomization. He also had a fractured vertebrae, lacerations on his liver, bruises all over his body, and prior rib fractures that were healing from child abuse. He was 4 years old. I'm just going to reiterate that. 4. And he had gone through all of that trauma. It's awful. The official cause of death was asphyxiation and blunt force trauma. The abuse was performed in the presence of his siblings as well. They were witness to it. There was also proof of abuse from his mother's telephone messages where she sent a text saying, quote, "Almost killed him so many times. I had to do CPR for him to wake up and stay alive right," end quote. To make matters worse, DCFS had been involved once again in Noah Quattro's case. They had an order to remove the boy from his home in May. It had already been approved and signed off by a judge, but they never followed through with taking the boy out of the home. And 2 months after this is when the boy was murdered. The mother claims she was innocent and would never hurt her son, but both parents were charged and arrested with the assault of their child, resulting in death. Now, I don't know about you, Brittany, but I'm about ready to sign a petition to make some changes in the DCFS down there in Los Angeles, California, because they for sure are at least one place that is extremely tainted. Obviously, we know it's all over the place, but that's 3 awful cases of little kids who went through such bad trauma and ended up dying.
Yeah, they need a complete overhaul. They need to take a look at every single one of their employees and every single one of their regulations and policies and just see what it is that literally letting these kids die.
Exactly. Noah had a signed paperwork from a judge to remove him from that house, and they just never did it. They never took him out of that abusive environment like they were supposed to. And 2 months after that signed document happened where they never removed him is when he died.
Yeah, this isn't even a case of a child just suffering in silence and then dying. People knew that this was happening and they still didn't help him.
Yeah, Anthony, 13 reports of child abuse and they did nothing.
If you or someone you know needs to report child abuse or endangerment, you can call your local CPS office. You can also call the ChildHelp National Abuse Hotline if you're in the U.S. That number is 1-800-4-A-CHILD or 1-800-422-4453, or the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST. We will have these in the show notes and on the notes for this episode. We'll also have it on the resource tab on our website, so you can always check that out if you need any of those resources. We also wanted to talk a little bit about sepsis. Before researching this case, I never would have thought that sepsis was as big of a problem for children's health as it is.
Yeah, I remember Brittany and I sitting in the coffee shop. I know we always say we're in a coffee shop. We always do our work in coffee shops. But we were working on this case, and me and Brittany were sitting there. We were like, when did you ever get sepsis as a kid? No. Did you? No. And then we were looking up. We were like, it can't be that common. Think about the situation that these kids were under for both of them to be, getting infections and possibly leading to sepsis, and definitely for Dom. And then we looked it up, and it is so common, so common, guys.
Yeah, sepsis is actually a leading cause of global childhood mortality. In the U.S. alone, 75,000 children get severe sepsis each year, and about 7,000 of those die. That means more children are dying from sepsis than cancer each year. Recognizing these symptoms is vital for quick action and recovery of the child. We saw tons of articles about parents that had lost children to sepsis because they just didn't know what to look for. So
yeah, and the younger the kid you have, infants and toddlers, they show symptoms in different ways and they don't verbalize what's wrong with them. So it could be even harder to know these types of symptoms when you're around them. So it's just so good to know what to look for at that age and to be aware of problems and changes in your child, so that way you can immediately take them for help.
Doing things to prevent SIDS and, prevent choking and prevent things like that. Those are so commonplace in things being taught to parents. But I feel like sepsis, I know I'm not a parent, neither are you, but that's just not something I've ever even thought to be concerned about.
Yeah. And with SIDS, there's nothing you can really do to 100% prevent it. But there are a lot of steps you can take to lower the risks that it would happen. But with sepsis, if it happens, it happens. It's an infection. It could be from inside. It could be from outside. And then moved into inside, obviously. But it's just something that you have to be on the lookout for. With SIDS, it's just sudden. You can't really tell a symptom ahead of time or anything.
So recognizing symptoms is so important, and something everyone, whether a parent or family member or a teacher or just anyone should know what these signs are so they can look for them. And remember, Dom was suffering through this for days without proper care. Large organizations like the WHO are making a bigger priority to inform the public on how to recognize signs that a child's going septic. These symptoms include fever or low temperature. That low temperature would be a sign in newborns and infants. Another symptom is fast heart rate and breathing. feeling cold, especially in extremities, clamminess or pale skin, confusion, dizziness, disorientation, shortness of breath, extreme pain or discomfort, and nausea and vomiting. Like I said, especially if you have kids or care for kids or just want to be an informed friend or family member, please take a minute to do your own research on this and figure out what symptoms are most common for the age group of the kids in your lives and what appropriate action would be. And when in doubt, like we said, just reach out. Call a doctor, call 911, call a nurse hotline, or any other resource if you're not sure. It's better to err on the side of caution so your child doesn't have to suffer like Dom did for all that time.
Do you think that Jennifer and Joseph were responsible for the death of their son Dom, or do you think that maybe this was a case of medical malpractice and the situation just wasn't handled appropriately or was maybe misevaluated?
Thanks for jumping into the abyss with us.
Sounding like we have a bird on the wall.
It's fine. So many creatures living in our apartment.
We love animals. And bugs. And water damage.
We love it.
Resort living. Guess around the about around.
Oh my God, get away from me. It almost flew in my mouth.